I woke up because someone said my name out loud, not yelled it, not whispered it, just said it calmly, like they were standing beside my bed and wanted my attention. My eyes snapped open, heart hammering, and for half a second I was sure someone was in the room with me. The apartment was dark and silent. No movement, no breathing but my own. I checked the time on my phone. R. Sisser EA.m. Then my phone started ringing. The screen showed an unknown number. I didn't answer. I sat there, frozen, staring at the glow until it stopped. I told myself it was coincidence, that my half-asleep brain had stitched unrelated things together. Then the phone rang again. Same number, same steady vibration. I answered, because something in me needed to know if the voice I'd heard belonged to the call. Can you hear me now? The voice said. It knew my name. It said it the way I do, with the same rhythm, the same slight hesitation at the end. I didn't respond. I was suddenly aware of how dark my bedroom was, how the corners seemed deeper than they should be. The voice waited. It wasn't rushed. That made it worse. Ken. I hung up and turned on the lamp so fast my hand shook. The light made the room feel smaller, exposed. I laughed under my breath, forcing sound into the space, trying to prove I was alone. The phone stayed quiet after that, but sleep never came back. I lay there until dawn, replaying the voice in my head, realizing it hadn't sounded like it came through a speaker. It sounded close. The next day passed in a blur. Every notification made my pulse spike. Every quiet moment felt staged. That night, I left the lights on and the TV playing low like noise could protect me. At rsishata.m. My phone rang again. This time, the screen showed my own number calling me. I answered before I could stop myself. I'm standing where you can't see me, the voice said. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over. I asked what it wanted, my voice cracking in a way I hated. It said it was already getting what it wanted, my attention, my listening, my fear. It told me darkness made it easier to speak and asked me to turn off the lights. I refused. The lights flickered anyway, just once, just enough to prove a point. I heard a sound then, a soft knock. Not on the door, on the wall behind me. The voice said it was practicing distance, learning where sound traveled best. It asked me to stay on the line. I backed into the hallway, phone pressed to my ear, realizing the call hadn't dropped when I moved. The voice moved with me. I tried to leave the apartment, but the front door wouldn't open. The lock turned. The handle moved. The door stayed shut. The voice told me not to panic. That panic made it harder to hear. It asked if I remembered inviting it in. I said no. It paused, then explained that permission didn't always feel like a choice. Okay? The knocking shifted, moving along the walls, slow and deliberate, until it stopped behind the bathroom mirror. The voice said it was almost ready to stand properly, that it just needed me to keep listening a little longer. When the call finally ended, the silence felt occupied. The dark felt alert. I didn't sleep at all after that. I watched the phone until morning, knowing it would ring again, knowing next time it wouldn't need to call. I tried to convince myself the worst part was over, that whatever had happened the night before was a one-time fracture. In reality, that would seal itself if I acted normal enough. That belief lasted until I noticed my phone battery was at 100%, even though I distinctly remembered unplugging it before dawn. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, waiting for it to do something on its own. It didn't. That somehow felt deliberate. I went to work exhausted, jumpy, hyper-aware of sound. Every time my phone buzzed in my pocket, my chest tightened, but it was never the call I was waiting for. That absence felt intentional too, like something was letting me settle, letting me convince myself I'd imagined it. By the time I got home that evening, I almost believed it. Faye? The apartment greeted me with silence that felt heavier than before. The lights were off, even though I always leave the kitchen light on. I stood in the doorway, a key still in my hand, listening for anything out of place. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. I told myself that meant safety and stepped inside. My phone rang immediately. And I didn't look at the screen this time. I answered without thinking, heart already racing, because not answering felt worse. The voice sounded pleased. It said it was glad I'd come back. It said it didn't like waiting alone. I asked how it knew I'd left. It answered by describing the shoes I was wearing. Okay. I locked myself in the bedroom and sat on the floor, phone pressed to my ear, trying not to shake. The voice spoke slowly, carefully, like it was choosing words it knew would keep me listening. It said nighttime made people honest, that darkness softened edges, that it could hear me better when I was afraid. I told it to stop calling me. It agreed too easily and said it would visit instead. The call ended. My phone screen went black. The room felt colder. That's when I heard the sound of movement above me, inside the ceiling. Not scratching, not crawling, something adjusting its weight, learning how to balance. I held my breath and listened as it shifted, inch by inch, following the line of my room. The sound stopped directly overhead. I felt watched in a way that had nothing to do with eyes. I didn't sleep. I counted seconds. I waited for the ceiling to give way. When morning finally came, it felt like a mistake. Like daylight wasn't supposed to find me still there. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no notifications. But in my call log, there were entries with no numbers, no timestamps, just blank spaces where calls should have been. That night, I didn't turn the lights on at all. I sat in the dark because part of me needed to know what would happen if I didn't resist. The phone rang at r/ea.m exactly. The voice sounded closer than ever. It said it could almost see me now. It asked me to stay still. It said standing up made it harder to focus. I stayed where I was. I listened. And somewhere in the apartment, something shifted its weight and learned my shape. By the third night, I understood that sleep wasn't something I could afford anymore. Every time my eyes closed, I felt the apartment change around me, like the darkness rearranged itself when I wasn't watching. I stayed awake with the lights off, sitting against the wall, listening to my own breathing so I wouldn't lose track of where I ended and everything else began. The phone didn't ring at first. That scared me more than when it did. Silence had become a signal, a way for it to tell me it was close enough not to need sound. I checked the time obsessively, watching the minutes crawl toward r/8am, my chest tightening with every passing second. When the moment came and went without a call, my stomach dropped. Then I heard it, a soft sound barely there. Not a knock this time, a pressure. Like someone leaning gently against the wall, testing how much weight it could put there without being noticed. The voice spoke without the phone ringing, drifting through the apartment like it belonged there. It told me I was doing well, that staying still made things easier for both of us. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't traveling through the air anymore. It felt internal, like a thought that didn't originate from me. It said my name again, and I felt something shift behind my eyes, like my attention was being pulled somewhere it shouldn't go. I stood up despite the warning. The moment I did, the apartment responded. The floor creaked in places I wasn't stepping. The walls ticked softly, like cooling metal. The voice asked me not to confuse it. It said consistency mattered. I ran to the bathroom and slammed the door, locking it, even though I knew locks had stopped meaning much. The mirror was covered in condensation, though I hadn't run the sink or shower. Shapes moved behind the fog, slow and uncertain, like something learning what a face was supposed to look like. The voice sounded thoughtful now, curious. It said mirrors were helpful but unreliable. That sound worked better. Memory worked best of all. It started reminding me of things I hadn't thought about in years. Conversations, regrets. Small moments I'd forgotten mattered. Each memory came with a weight, like something anchoring itself deeper inside me. I realized then that it wasn't just calling me. It was cataloging me. My phone vibrated in my pocket even though I hadn't felt it ring. When I pulled it out, the screen was dark but warm. The voice told me it didn't need devices anymore. That phones were just practice. That now it knew where to stand when it spoke. I slid down the bathroom wall and sat on the floor, shaking, trying to stay present. The voice lowered itself to a whisper, intimate and careful. It said this was the part most people struggled with. The overlap, the moment when it became hard to tell which thoughts were being offered and which ones were mine. Something pressed against the bathroom door from the other side. Not hard, just enough to let me know it was there. The voice said it was proud of how long I'd stayed aware, that most people went quiet by now. I realized then that it wasn't waiting for permission anymore. It was waiting for me to stop resisting. Okay? I don't remember deciding to open the door. I only remember standing up and realizing my hand was already on the handle. The idea of resisting had worn thin, like a word repeated too many times until it lost meaning. The voice didn't tell me to open it. It didn't need to. It had learned when I moved before I did. The bathroom door opened silently. The hallway was dark, but not empty. It had depth now, layers. I could feel where it was thicker, where it gathered, where it leaned closer. The voice came from everywhere at once, calm and patient, like a guide explaining a process I was already halfway through. It said I was almost synchronized, that listening was becoming effortless. I stepped forward, barefoot on the cold floor, and the apartment responded. The walls creaked softly, not with age, but with adjustment, like muscles stretching. I understood then that the space wasn't just containing whatever this was. It was cooperating, helping it find angles, carry sound, hold shape. The voice asked me to remember the first time I'd felt truly alone. Not recently, not here, long before this apartment. The memory surfaced without effort, sharp and vivid, and with it came a sensation of something settling into place. I felt lighter, less dense, like parts of me were being offloaded. I tried to speak to ask what would happen next, but the words came out wrong, slower, flatter. The voice corrected me gently, repeating my sentence the way it should sound. When it spoke, my chest tightened, not with fear, but recognition. It was using me as a reference. I caught my reflection in the living room window. For a moment, there were two of us layered together, slightly out of sync. Then the image corrected itself. Only one remained. The voice sounded pleased. It said alignment was improving, that soon it wouldn't need to practice anymore. My phone rang from somewhere behind me. I didn't turn around. I already knew what the screen would show. I already knew who would answer. The voice said this was the last part that hurt, that awareness faded unevenly, that I should focus on the sound of breathing to stay anchored as long as possible. Something stepped closer. Not touching, not yet. I felt pressure change around me, like air being displaced by a body that didn't fully belong to the room. The voice thanked me for being receptive, for listening so carefully, for answering every time. I realized then that the calls hadn't been about communication. They were about training me to listen without questioning the source. The lights flickered once, just once, and when they steadied, the apartment felt occupied in a way I couldn't explain. The voice spoke again, but it didn't sound separate anymore. It sounded internal, familiar, practiced. I tried to hold on to my name. I repeated it silently over and over, afraid that if I stopped, it would be taken too. The voice paused when it heard me doing that. There was something like amusement in the silence. It said I could rest now. I don't know how long I stood there after that. Time had flattened, stretching into something wide and thin, and I moved through it without friction. The apartment felt finished, like a set after the cameras stopped rolling. I was still aware, but awareness had weight now, pressing me inward. I watched myself walk to the bedroom. The body moved correctly, confident, familiar. It picked up my phone and checked the screen, thumb moving with practiced ease. When it spoke, my voice sounded better than it ever had. Calmer, certain, someone who belonged here. And I tried to scream, but the effort went nowhere. Sound requires distance, and I didn't have any left. The voice told me this was normal, that the last thing to fade was observation. That watching helped with the transition. Morning came, sunlight spilled across the floor, and nothing looked wrong. Neighbors passed in the hallway and nodded. Someone said my name, and the body answered without hesitation. I felt something tighten, then loosen, like a knot finally giving up. As the day went on, my thoughts thinned. Details slipped away first, then emotions. Fear dulled into something academic. I understood what was happening without reacting to it. The voice said that meant it was almost complete. And that night, the phone rang once more, even though no one else could hear it. The voice asked if I could still listen. I focused on it with everything I had left. It thanked me and said this was goodbye, spoken gently, like reassurance. I can feel the building settle around the body now, accepting it the way a lung accepts air. Doors open easily. Lights respond. The space recognizes the shape moving through it as correct. I feel myself thinning further, stretched into corners, into silence, into places sound doesn't reach. The voice doesn't speak anymore because it doesn't need to. Everything it wants is happening without instruction. I am not afraid. I am not calm. I am something quieter than both. Something that exists only to notice what has already replaced me. It waits patiently, content with the rhythm of days, knowing no one will question the change long enough to stop it. This is how it survives, quietly, efficiently, leaving nothing behind except a feeling people learn to ignore. And it will keep doing this as long as there are voices left alive. And now there isn't much of me left, just impressions, echoes, the memory of sound moving through dark rooms. If you're hearing this, if any part of me reached beyond these walls, remember this. And when something calls you in the middle of the night, don't answer. Don't listen. And don't assume silence means safety. Sometimes it just means it's already learned your voice.